Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF book club. Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Sasha Peyton Smith. Sasha is the New York Times bestselling author of fantasy novels for young adults, including The Witch Haven and The Rose Bargain. Her work has been translated into more than a dozen languages worldwide. She lives in a 100-year-old house in the mountains of Utah with her husband and allegedly two ghosts, though she has yet to see them. Welcome to the show, Sasha.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am so glad to have you here, listeners. I just finished The Rose Bargain last week, and it was so good. So just go run and grab yourself a copy right now, and then you can come back and tune in. Well, I feel like we're so much more than these bios. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, an update on the ghosts. I have now lived in the house for 6 months and still no sign of them. The woman who lived in the house
Okay.
for almost 40 years, whom we bought the house from, warned us that there were two ghosts, a man and a woman, and I think perhaps the ghosts followed her. So that's an important ghost update. Um,
Yeah.
my name is Sasha. I grew up in Sandy, Utah, in the mountains, surrounded by a million siblings and animals and books, and I had a really kind of idyllic childhood. I always say I wasn't always a writer, but I was always a reader. I grew up in a house where our presents were books on Christmas morning, and everybody was always, reading something new and passing it back and forth. I have a sister who's very close in age to me, and so reading was really like a team sport together. We were always reading the same things. It wasn't until I went to college, I was a biology major, and then I
Okay.
went to graduate school for public health, and I moved away from Utah to Washington, D.C., and I was sitting in my tiny apartment in Washington, D.C., and I was 23 and going through one of those like earth-shattering early 20s breakups, and I had no friends, and I was in this new city, and I'd been a reader my whole life, but I fancied myself kind of a serious, practical, sciencey person. And the idea for The Witch Haven, which was my debut novel, came to me. It was about a school for witches in 1911 New York City. And I thought, well, how hard could it be? Why don't I try to write this as a project just and the answer is very hard. It was incredibly difficult. But I was more stubborn than the book, which was an interesting lesson that I learned about myself. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden I went from being in grad school to getting to live my like 14-year-old dream life. And all of these things went right. And all of a sudden I was a published author. I say all of a sudden, 3 years later, I was a published author.
Yeah. Poof, magic. It was
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
that.
I did grad school and then I finished the book and then I got it, but when you're in your 20s, everything seems a little fast. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I published The Witch Haven and its sequel, and now The Rose Bargain is my third book, and I'm kind of settling into this life I never quite pictured for myself. This like incredible life where I get to make art and meet interesting people and think about fairies and witches all day long.
Yeah. So are you doing anything with the biology public health at this point?
So no, I am
Okay.
so blessed I was able to quit my day job. I did not quit my day job until The Rose Bargain sold. So
Okay.
my first two books, I was like, oh, this could be a fluke. One book deal does not a career make.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was going to be just like a really weird footnote in the story of my life. And so I worked at a children's hospital in Washington, D.C., doing public
Okay.
programming up until May of 2023. So about a year and a half ago, I quit my day job.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing. I think there's many people out there that aspire, right, to be a writer. And I think we're told, we've talked about this on the show before. It's like we think about a career in the arts and, oh, they don't make money, right? So a lot of times it's like, okay, well, what else could I do because I can't do the XYZ in the arts because I'm being told that I'm not going to make money doing this job, right?
Yep. And I've joked I'm the absolute worst person for somebody in their early 20s to talk to because I'm like, oh my God, no, your artistic dreams will totally come true. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You'll make six figures like doing the job of your dreams. You don't have to worry about that practical degree.
Yeah. Yeah, and you want to encourage people to believe in themselves, right? And you want to be able to pursue your passions. But yes, at the end of the day, you need to pay the bills, right? So there's like this catch 22 of, well, which way do I take this?
And also, the important caveat is, I quit my job in May of 2023. I got married in July of 2022. And so while this, writing job is now taking care of me financially, I don't know if I would have had the bravery to quit had I not have a partner who also had a steady
Yeah.
job in health insurance. And, I'm incredibly blessed that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gave you the freedom to be able to step back to do
For
that.
sure. It makes me feel a little bit more brave to know that I have a safety net. I have a lot of respect for artists who are able to make the leap without one.
Yes. Well, I love what you said as well, because we've talked about it a lot as well about being like the perseverance that authors must have to go through this process. But I love that you said I was more stubborn than the book.
I've often said that I don't think that I am a, preternaturally talented writer. I have a biology degree. I haven't taken an English class since I was 17, which don't look at the commas too closely in my book. I'm sure I'm not using them correctly. God bless my
Yeah.
copy editors. But I think the one skill or trait, I guess, that I have is that I am extraordinarily stubborn. And I think that the number one thing you have to write a book is a borderline delusional belief that it's all going to work out and that it'll get better. Because I think that a lot of people write the first draft of a book and they compare this first draft to books that they've loved. If you write
Yeah.
books, it's because you love books. And so you look at a first draft, and all first drafts are bad by definition. Nobody has ever written their way or thought their way out of a bad first draft. And you look at a crappy first draft and it feels bad because you compare
Yeah.
it to the books that you love and you think, well, I guess I'm just not that good at this. And that's where a lot of people quit. And what you need to be able to make a career in this is the ability to say, well, this is bad now, but it won't
Yeah.
be bad forever. And that's a really emotionally uncomfortable place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just dig your heels back in and
Yep.
get to work with it.
Yep. And do you
I,
ever feel like, and I don't even ever feel like that I get to a point where I get a final draft. I'm like, and now it's good. Like I
yeah.
get to the point where I'm like, well,
I
I'm
made
done working on it.
it. See, that's where I feel like I would get very quickly. I'd be like, I am so tired of looking at this. I can't look at it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, call it good.
It's deadlines come in handy for me. And that I now have people to hand it off to and be like, well, if it's truly bad, they'll tell me.
Absolutely. Well, for listeners that might not have picked up The Rose Bargain yet, can you tell them a little bit about it?
Of course, The Rose Bargain is my new YA romantasy novel. It is about an alternate history of Victorian England, where the Queen of England is a fairy who tricked her way onto the throne during the War of the Roses. So now it's 400 years later, and she has been ruling England, and every citizen is granted the opportunity to make one bargain with her. But all fairy bargains come at a cost. Our kind of high society, aristocratic girls are expected to make bargains that will win them husbands. Our main character, Ivy Benton, is the daughter of a near bankrupt lesser noble. Her sister has recently disgraced the family with her disappearance and mysterious reappearance. And Ivy is sure that she will have no suitors this season. And so when the queen announces that this is the season that her son will take a wife, Ivy is the first person to sign up for the competition in blood. She is offered an unlikely alliance with the prince's brother, who wants to take down the queen and needs Ivy's help. So
Yeah.
we've compared it to, The Selection and The Cruel Prince and Bridgerton. But I set out to write the most fun novel that I could.
Yeah. I am a huge historical fiction fan, and then I'm newer to the world of fantasy and romantasy. And it's actually why I started the podcast, is so I could get book recommendations in this realm. And I loved it. I devoured it because I think of that historical piece to it, right? Like I felt like I was still like in this other world, but learning like what it would be like to be in that time period.
I had a lot of fun because my first series is a historical fantasy, but it takes place in, ostensibly real 1911. And so I had to do a lot of pretty hard historical research. This book was fun because I got to have a lot of creativity. In the book, the queen takes the throne in 1471. And so I got to research, well, what has happened in 1471 that now I can't
Yeah.
change? And what would have happened over the next 400 years that would look a little different if a fairy were on the throne? And so it was fun. I learned things like, oh, the Prince of Wales title has existed since before the 1400s. And so her son is still the
Wow.
Prince of Wales.
Okay.
Or Parliament was, created in the 1000s. And so Parliament still exists. I took some liberties and then I kept all the castle names the same. I don't know if she would have named all of the palaces exactly the
Sure.
same things that the Tudors would have named them.
Yes.
I still wanted it to feel like Victorian England because I think that's such a juicy time period to set something in. But I had a lot of fun with that historical setting.
Yeah. And then it gives us like, oh yeah, like Kensington. Oh, I know that, right? Like it
Yeah,
gives us some familiarity to it
it
as
gives
well.
us a feeling. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. The pacing was so good. I could not put it down. Like I just kept going. I kept walking around with it. I'm like wandering around my house with this book for when I'd have a spare moment, right? To pick it back up. So it was
As an
great.
author, that's the ultimate compliment. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Just attach it to my hip, have a little thing, and then just wander
Yeah.
around with it. So my kids were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's so good. I have to know what's gonna happen."
And like I said, I'm a reader first. And so that feeling as a reader is so like addictive. It's what you
Yeah.
want as a reader. Like to find a book that's grabbing you in that way is so exciting. It feels a little bit like falling in love. So to have, my book about that feels
Yes.
like the coolest thing in the world.
Yes, and because I'm only what, 5 days out from finishing it, I'm still in a bit of a book slump. I will tell you that. Like I'm like nothing else is grabbing me right now. So again, I think that's another compliment though.
Thank you. We'll get to some recommendations later and I'll see if I can get you out of the slump.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, what do you hope for readers, or what do you wish they'll get from it when they read The Rose Bargain?
I wrote The Rose Bargain when I was actually in kind of a dark period of my life. I was off my debut series and I was facing this big career failure. At the beginning I say that I'm so lucky to have made this a career, but there were some real ups and downs. I was really prepared for failure with my first series, and then I was met with success, and I was kind of shocked by that because you read about all the failure. And then I thought, oh, well, I did it. I did it. And I had this New York Times bestselling series and, people like me and I know people now and I know how this works now. And then the next book I sent out failed and nobody wanted it. And it
Wow.
gutted me. And I know now it's super common. It happens to
Yeah.
everybody, but I was not prepared for that like secondary level of failure. And so I was at home for the holidays and I was in my childhood bedroom and I looked up at my shelf of all these books that I'd loved as a teenager. And I thought, well, my career is probably over. So what if I wrote a book just for my teenage self? What if I wrote a book that's just like the ones I would have wanted to pass to my little sister? And I was sad. I was so sad. And I was determined to not write a sad book. And so I put in all of the most like self-indulgent, silly, fun things that would have made me like giggle and kick my feet. And from there, the Rose Bargain was born. And then I was really shocked when other people seemed to like it. I again was like really prepared for failure, and instead people were like, "Oh, we love this," and I'm like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
still like me? It's not over." And so I came up with this just like really, I don't know, kind of self-indulgent, fun book. And so to hear that other people are having fun with it is, like the best feeling.
Yeah. Do you think that like the difference in writing your first two books versus this one, like you kind of gave up, well, I want to write this for others because you said like I want to write this one for me. So you take away some of that, I don't know, veneer or whatever word you want to put on
Yeah.
that of like I'm just writing this for my teenage self.
Yeah. I definitely let myself have more fun with this one. The first one, I mean, it's a more serious book, just in like theme and tone. Um,
Sure.
but I also felt very serious about it. I was really trying to prove myself as an artist, and I was teaching myself how to write a book as I was writing my
Yeah.
book. This book, I had a sure sense of my own craft and my own ability to actually write a book. And so with those kind of training wheels off, I feel like I was able to let myself like get a little bit more, silly and wild and
Yeah.
confident in the choices I was making. Um, and I really just wanted this book to evoke a feeling of joy. And I wanted it to evoke, I don't know, like that feeling of reading a book. I specifically was a teenager in like, 2009, 2010, and that kind of, era of YA books like Delirium and The Hunger Games and the later Twilight books and those books
Yeah.
that you could not put down, was my ultimate goal in like evoking a feeling with the Rose Bargain.
Well, yeah, you did it.
Oh gosh.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So you've already mentioned about learning that you were more stubborn than a book, but what else have you learned about yourself through writing?
Oh my gosh, I've learned that I'm actually not as solitary as I thought I was. I was a really kind of put my head down and work person in college, and I thought that writing would be much the same way. And I was surprised to learn how much of a team sport it was and how much I really enjoy writing with other people, and how much writers need other people.
Yeah.
I think it would be really impressive and romantic to say that I, get to go to beautiful coffee shops and ponder in my own head and sip a beautiful drink and then a book is born. But the truth is I really rely on my friends and my writing partners to help me brainstorm and encourage me. And to be able to do that for other people is so much fun. There are two women I write with almost every night at 9 p.m. They put their kids to bed and we get on
Oh my
Zoom
God.
and we do 15-minute sprints and we write for 15 minutes and then we go back to the Zoom and we ask each other, okay, what did you write? Are you stuck? And we're able to be like, oh man, she's in the scene with the prince, and I don't know what they need to be saying to each other. And then the three of us get to talk through what that scene would be. I
That's awesome.
am still incredibly close with my best friend from college, and my other best friend is a writer. And so I have this community of these brilliant, supportive artists, and to be able to do this career that's hard and knocks you down by other people's side, has been such a gift. And it's been so fun to also get to like contribute to other people's books. I always joke it's so much like I have so much more fun working on other people's plot problems.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I can fix this because I don't have to write this.
Yeah. It's
And
not
you
my problem to solve.
exactly, and you can see something so much more clearly when it's not your own work. You're like, oh no, they just need to walk into the room together. And they're like, oh my gosh, they just need to walk into the room together.
How simple.
How simple. Yeah, the solution is always more simple than you think. And so finding that community has been so lovely and such a surprise because I didn't really expect it. I expected writing to be solitary. Um, it's also really been an exercise in reconnecting with my teenage self. I write young adult novels. I write, I'm an adult who reads young adult novels. There's so much crossover in readership now, but
Sure.
fundamentally, I'm writing for teenagers. And so I do a lot of thinking about my own teenage self and, who she was and what she would have wanted. And I think you lose a lot of your teenage bravery. I don't know about you, but I was very brave as a teenager. Like I was pretty brazen and confident, and I
Yeah.
lost a lot of that in my 20s. And I sometimes think that maybe my entire adult life is just me trying to once again become my 15-year-old self because she felt so confident in who she was and what she wanted and her ability to achieve it. And
Yeah.
then life strips that away from you a little bit. And so being able to think so much about the things that I loved before the world told me who I should be or broke me down or, just
Yeah.
does the things that life does to you, has been so lovely.
Yeah, I will say that I'm on the end of my 30s now, and I feel like the 30s allow you to bring it back. Like
Yeah.
you just realize like life is too short, and I need to find myself again, right? Like I've lost myself in my 20s, and now I need to find myself, and so it'll come.
Yeah,
You'll,
like is the purest, most platonic version of myself like me in the ninth grade who like was so unafraid of trying anything. Like this year I've been trying to get back into painting and just sewing, and I go to these adult ballet classes and I'm doing all of these things that I loved so much as a teenager. And I'm like, man, she really maybe had it figured out.
yeah, well, I think you then like unlock these things, right?
Mhm.
Recently, my kids have been wanting to have dance parties after dinner. And so we'll like blast the music and we go outside, and my daughter got pom-poms for Christmas,
Oh my
which I
gosh.
was on the dance team in high school. So we're like dancing around the backyard with these pom-poms, which I was totally the kid that would make up the routines and then like make the adults watch them in
Yep.
our family.
Yep. Can I
And
hit
it
the
like
cover?
unlocked this part of me. And I was like, oh my, I miss this. Like just being silly and like dancing around and like, and all of my kids, they love it. And I was like, well, this is the easiest way for all of us to go have a good time. Like we have some bad moods or grumpy attitudes. Let's go turn on some music and just go to the backyard and dance. And it's been so fun. And it like made me realize like I loved this as a
Yeah.
kid, but I've just lost it.
Yeah, and it's like those doors just get locked and put away for some reason. I think it's
Yeah.
busier and life has more demands on you. But no, absolutely. I'm like, oh, this is what life's about, man.
Yes, yeah. It's and then they'll like ask, be like, "Can we do a dance party tonight?" I'm like, "Of course we can do a dance party tonight."
I love that.
So you will find it, and I'm sure I have yet to discover more doors that I locked long ago, right? Like we'll
Oh,
just
yeah.
find them and then remember, like, yes, I did love that.
Yep. And giving yourself the permission to like reconnect with those parts of yourself. And I think that writing these books has allowed me the permission to like explore those parts of myself again. And
Yeah.
it's been such a gift.
That's wonderful. And I love the community aspect too, because I think we need each other. And so we need to
Oh,
find these
yeah.
individuals in our lives that can build us up, right? And we all build each other up together. And it sounds like you found that. So that's amazing.
It's been
Well, let's
incredible.
switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. So what genres do you enjoy reading?
My gosh, like I said, I'm still a YA reader. YA fantasy has always been my first love. I read a lot of YA fantasy. I read a lot of historical romance.
Okay.
I've gotten slightly more into lit fic this year, literary fiction, which always intimidated me, even as I
Yeah.
became a reader. Yeah, but I love, and I'm trying to get more into adult fantasy because the world building has always intimidated me, but I feel like I have so much to learn from adult fantasy authors. But truly my loves and my bread and butter are historical fantasy and are historical fiction and YA fantasy.
Okay. All right. And how in your business do you find time to read?
Oh my gosh, I joke that when I first started writing, it's like I'd made one of those like mythological bargains where I loved reading, so I became a writer and then I couldn't read anymore.
Yeah.
It was this like curse upon me.
Yeah.
Um,
Too many words. I'm done.
or something's either really good and I'm trying to dissect it, or it's not how I would have done it. I'm like leaving mental notes on it, which is also not a good way
Oh,
to read.
yeah.
Um, And so I feel like after my debut novel came out, I really had to learn how to be a reader again. And it was something that took, probably 2 solid years to get back into in a way that gave me joy in the way that it used to before I became a professional writer. But yeah, I now really make an effort to read every night before bed. And then I also am so blessed that I get to read a lot of books early because I get sent all of these fabulous
Yeah.
novels to blurb. And that's like the most fun thing in the world to get to read my friends and colleagues' novels so early. And then I get to be like, I'm working, leave me alone. And my husband's like, you're reading a romance novel on the couch. I'm like, it's
Yes.
work.
Yes.
Busy day at the office.
I have a similar, not that I'm a writer, but obviously I'll get advanced copies for the
Yeah.
podcast as well. And I was just joking with a friend this week about I have like 4 books that I have to read for upcoming episodes. And I'm like, but I should just take a moment to acknowledge that I have made my love my job. And
Yep.
that is amazing.
Yep. And it's a double-edged sword, but it's mostly amazing.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm like, I haven't picked up like quote unquote they're all leisure books because I've
Yeah.
loved all the books that I get sent, right? And I usually am picking authors of genres I want to read, a little self-professing there a little bit.
Yeah.
But I I'm not like I right now I'm like I can't go pick up whatever's on my TBR list because I want to make sure I'm like reading the books that I have for upcoming, right? The deadline's coming, so I need to read these
Yep.
first and back to college where I was like, no leisure books until you're
Yep.
done with whatever you need to do before you pick something else up. Because then I know I'll gravitate to that and I won't want to read anything else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, well, you have also brought a book flight with you today. Can you tell
Yeah.
us how you chose these books?
So I chose these books and the books that I feel like shaped me as a person. They were the books that like really, kind of rocked my world and like reframed how I was reading, both in childhood and in adulthood. And I feel like they're books that, wormed their way into my brain and later influenced what became the Rose Bargain. So I tried to kind of strike that balance of books that shaped me and books that shaped me both as a reader and as a writer.
Yes, there's one on here that I literally squealed when I saw we were going to talk about it. So yay. What's
Okay,
the
great.
first
I'm
book you
excited to
brought?
see what.
Yes. Tell us what the first book you brought today is.
The first book is Ella Enchanted, which I consider a classic of the genre. So this is a Gail Carson Levine novel. If you're about my age, you probably also read it as a girl when you were like
Okay.
10. Um,
Yeah.
and it is a loose Cinderella retelling about this girl named Ella who has been cursed by a fairy to be obedient. So if somebody in her life tells her to do something, she must do it. And so she sets out as a teenager to find the fairy that gave her this quote unquote gift and break the curse. And along the way, she meets a lot of like fun mythological creatures and the dreamiest prince ever put to literature, Prince Char.
There he
And
is.
it's one of those books that I read. I have to look up what year it came out. It's probably like 11 or 12 when I first read this book. And I
Okay.
think it was the first like truly romantic book that I read. And I reread it a couple of years ago as an adult, and I was like, oh, this book is romantic. Like he is a dreamboat. And
Yeah.
I think the dreamiest thing about him is how much he respects her. and that she's really driving the plot and, facing down her own destiny. And by her side, she has this boy who adores her and would do anything for her because he respects her so much as a person. He respects her
Yeah.
intelligence and he respects that she's strong and he wants to be there to support her, but not take over her journey. And that was such a, I don't know, it like rearranged my little brain is that I'm in love with this boy
Yeah.
because like I'm 11 and I also feel like I'm strong and tough and smart.
Well, and it gave you this, I'm imagining, I've been thinking a lot about this book that got me back into reading as an adult. And I'm like, what is it about that book
Yeah.
that I loved that opened up my world again? And I'm wondering, did this open up like this world of like romance for you
Oh,
at that age?
100%. I'm forever chasing the high of my like heart and
Yes.
being like, kiss,
Yeah.
kiss, kiss. Um,
Yeah.
and I also, speaking of it influencing the Rose Bargain, I have always been a fan of creepy fairies. I love that this fairy was kind of, she wasn't quite evil, but she was careless and flippant and decidedly not human. And
Yeah.
that's always the fairy mythology that I've loved. I mean,
Yeah.
I read all the Fae, romantasy books like everybody else, and they're so much fun. But the specific Fae mythology, I've always loved, and it's something
Yeah.
that exists within the Rose Bargain is Fae as not quite benevolent and not quite human creatures.
Yeah. And very high class compared to us humans.
Yes, of course.
So wonderful. So that was Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine.
Hmm?
And what's the next book you brought today?
Marrying Winterborn by Lisa Kleypas. And so I mentioned a little bit that I had to relearn how to be a reader. And Marrying Winterborn is a historical romance novel. Lisa Kleypas, so she's actually the best friend and writing partner of Julia Quinn, who wrote Bridgerton.
Oh, yeah.
So a
Okay.
very Bridgerton-esque book, if that's kind of your touchstone for historical romance novels.
Yeah.
Very of the era and very similar. My hottest take, and I love the Bridgerton books as well. I love Lisa's heroes. I think that her men are swoonier than Julia Quinn's. And
Ooh, okay.
I think her books are slightly funnier than the Bridgerton books. There's a level of humor to them that I always appreciate. But it was, 2021 and my debut novel had come out and it was still like kind of the pandemic and I really hadn't read a book in like a year and I felt like I had lost this part of myself that I really loved, this part of myself that loved to read. And I truly cannot tell you how I picked up my first Lisa Kleypas book. It's something that like, I don't know, it like sprang to life in my brain. Like all of a sudden I like came to consciousness and I'd read five. Like
Yeah.
and they are so brilliantly researched and crafted. She's somebody that's been writing she's like been putting out a book a year since the 80s. And so she has this like
Wow.
enormous back catalog of books, and every single one of them is so fun. And like all good historical romance novels, you know what you're getting into trope wise. Like, there's going to be a happily ever after and a couple caught in a compromising position in a rose garden and, family politics and, kissing under the stairs. But she brings in, real history and these really fiery heroines, and every book feels just different enough that it's like a fun adventure. So Marrying Winterborn is the second in the Ravenels series. Like
Okay.
Bridgerton, most of her kind of series, these like chunks of books follow a family, and so they're all interconnected. So the Ravenels is her most recent series. It's the series she's been writing throughout the 2000s. And Marrying
Okay.
Winterborn is the second in the series. So if you want to just start, I would recommend starting with Cold Hearted Rake, which is the first in the series.
Okay.
You get
Okay.
the introduction to the family, but there's something about Reese Winterborn, who is this broody department store billionaire who couldn't possibly be with this, beautiful aristocrat, that I just find so fun and so swoony. And Helen, the main character in Marrying Winterborn, is one of my favorite book heroines of all time. People really underestimate her, which is a trope that I love.
Yeah.
And so, reading all of these Lisa Kleypas novels, the Rose Bargain would not exist without them, and without all of these, Regency romance novels that I really fell in love with in 2021 and 2022, that brought me so much joy and taught me how to love reading again.
Yeah. Well, I super appreciate this recommendation because I didn't read historical romance until last year. Like it
Yeah.
was like November, someone had come on and brought a historical romance book flight, and I was like, I should try this. and I devoured Edenbrook in a day. And I was
Yep.
like, I love this. And so then I'm like, now I'm on a mission to find some more. So I really
They're,
appreciate this recommendation.
they're so fun. And of course, she's been writing romance since the 80s. And so most of her covers are like, a hot girl in a prom dress and like a broody shirtless man and like a castle far away on a hill. And there's if you think of like the platonic ideal of a romance novel cover, it's these covers,
Yeah.
which are so fun. And I love for like the camp of it all. But I think she's a certifiable genius. These books are so smart and fun and good.
Okay.
And I don't want people to underestimate just how, good and well researched and, multifaceted the content is because of the covers.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to add is I hate to admit this, but I do judge a book by its cover a little bit. And there is like something about the shirtless man that I'm like,
Yep.
like I think cheesy romance novels of the 80s, right?
Oh,
Where I'm like, nope,
100%.
I don't think this would be for me.
My,
And I
yeah.
might need to reevaluate that.
My high school English teacher she collected like cheesy romance novels, which is funny, but I think it made me really look down upon the genre. It was like a joke in her room was, my
Yes.
God, these covers and this title. And then I started reading them, and perhaps I should have seen this coming earlier. I'm like, oh, people actually malign things that women love. But I started reading these books and I was like, oh, these are brilliantly crafted novels.
Yes. Yeah, I'm actually a physical therapist by trade. So I've had many a patient come in with like this cover book and they'll kind of hide it. Like it's kind of
Yep.
that shame that surrounds this novel and they're like, "Oh, no, I just read trash." And so
Yep.
I think just in my mind, that's what I associated it with. And I'm like, well, what a disservice I did to myself,
Yeah.
I
Oh, I
think in that.
agree. I'm mad it took me 20 years to be reading these books. I'm like, I could have been having so much fun so much earlier.
Absolutely. So that was Marrying Winterborn by Lisa Kleypas. And then what's the last book you brought today?
I had to put in my favorite book of all time, I Capture the Castle.
Yes. This was the one that had me so
I
excited. I'm like, we
wondered,
have never talked about this one on the show.
people, and again, it's not a particularly well-known novel, but the people who know it love it.
Yes.
It is a classic. So it was written by Dodie Smith, who also wrote 101 Dalmatians, weirdly.
Yes.
Um, And it was written in the 1950s and it takes place in the 1930s in England. And it's told in the form of a diary of the 17-year-old girl named Cassandra Mortmain. And she lives in kind of genteel poverty in this crumbling castle with her eccentric family and her, starving artist father and her sister who's desperate to get out. And two American brothers move in next door. And her sister immediately knows that this is her way out. And so it's this story of, coming of age and first love. And Cassandra is the most vibrant heroine I've ever read. Her voice, like, still, I can hear it in my head. She feels so real
Yeah.
to me. And I read it at 17, and it's one of those books that found me at exactly the right time. Um, but it's one of the first books that made me truly want to be a writer. I think it was
I
the
love
first
that.
book where I was able to appreciate the craft of what Dodie Smith had done rather than just, kind of consuming something and going on to the next. And I still reread it every Christmas Eve. And it's a book that has just such I don't know, fond place in my heart. I don't know. What about you? What do you
Yeah.
think about it?
Like the nostalgia piece of it, right?
Yeah.
I read this only a few years ago because I was doing a Century of Great Books challenge where I was trying to read a book from every year for the past century. And so this ended up in my list because, of course, I'm researching like what's a great book from 1953 or whatever year
Yeah.
it was written, right? And I listened to it as an audiobook,
Oh,
and it was
wow.
so much fun because it was almost like a radio drama.
Yes.
And it was a fantastic audiobook as well. And if you've never listened to a book that's been like dramatized like that, I
Mhm.
would highly recommend I Capture the Castle because it was such a fun read and romp through. And it's not a particularly long book. I mean, I haven't seen it in physical form, but it was like under 4 hours, I think, as an audiobook.
No, it's not particularly dense, nor is it particularly complicated, but it's just one of the
Yeah,
books where I truly feel like I know everyone in that book. I'm like,
yeah.
oh, my friend Rose Mortman, that girl I
I
know.
know her.
Yeah, I know her whole deal.
Yes. Yeah, it's a fantastic book. And I think that's what that challenge taught me is these books that were written long ago, you don't necessarily need to be afraid of them. I think I remember back to
Mhm.
like English class and having to like slog through the classics, right? Because some of them are so dense,
Yep.
but this is not that at
No,
all. It was
no, very
so fun.
accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. How I love to end our show here is with our bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions. So you can answer them really quick. Are you a rereader?
I am. Yeah, not
Okay.
always, but I like a reread. Yeah.
Okay. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Oh my gosh. I read Red Queen, which is Victoria Aveyard's fabulous YA fantasy, and then I read an interview with her saying that she was at home the summer after college, very, just kind of struggling to figure out what to do next, and she wrote her first novel. And at the time I read that interview, I was at home the summer after college, struggling what to do next, and her story in that brilliant book gave me the bravery to start writing my own first draft.
Love that. Found you when you most needed it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So where is your favorite place to read?
I'm very boring in bed. I'm a read before going to bed person, and I love being propped up on the pillows with my Kindle.
Yep. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
Oh my gosh. Like everyone, I'm reading Onyx Storm right now.
Yep.
And the new Emily Wilde book, speaking of fairy books, comes out week after next.
Oh, okay.
And I'm very excited for the third book in the Emily Wilde series. If you guys have not read those, it's about a fairy researcher in kind of turn of the century England, and they are so fun and original, but dip into all this old classic fairy lore that I love.
Absolutely. Yeah, I started the Encyclopedia of Fairies. Is that the
Yes.
first one in the series?
Yep.
So I started it on a trip and then I think I just got like away from it.
Yeah.
Life happened. So I'm like, I need to go back and pick that up now that you remind me.
They're fun. They have I love kind of an unlikely love interest, and the love interest in that book is really fun. He's very unlike all of the other love interests that are very popular right now. He's like
Yeah.
this fussy little professor who sews, and I love him so much.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes you need that little breath of fresh air, right? When things all start to feel the same.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Oh my gosh, it's been so lovely to meet and to chat, and I am so happy we got to do this.
Yes, thank you. And listeners, actually, why don't you tell them where they can find you? Like a
Oh,
website, Instagram, whatever, wherever you want them to find you.
of course, I'm most active on Instagram, which is
Okay.
at Sasha Peyton Smith. My website is
Okay.
Sasha P. Smith.
Okay.
On TikTok sometimes, that's at Sasha P. Smith. And The Rose Bargain is out in the United States on February 4th and out in the
Yes.
UK on February 13th, wherever books are sold. Barnes& and Noble has a fabulous special edition. And I'm just so excited for this book to be out in the world.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. And I'll include all the links in the show notes as well, listeners, so you can click those very easily. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Sasha Peyton Smith and her book flight of books that influenced her reading and writing life. You can find all the books that we talked about today at bookishflights.com. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.